Welcome back, everyone. I'm Zell, and today we're going to do a comparison of the Chinese competitors in the higher-end knife market. Alright guys, whenever we have a new company come on board, like Bestech, coming out with titanium and S35VN knives with good looks to them and nice milling and everything, people want to know, what is the difference? What am I getting if I spend that extra $50 on the Wee knife? What am I getting if I spend that extra couple $100 on the Reate knife? And, oh, yeah, this one was only $60. I didn't have a Kaiser that really fit with this group of knives, so even though this sliver is a really cool knife, we're not going to get to put Kaiser in this comparison. Sorry, guys. If somebody does have a Kaiser that would fit with this group, let me know. However, I really don't think it's necessary because what we're going to talk about here applies to Kaiser just like it does to these guys. Everybody wants to have something tangible that they can put on these knives to say, this is why this knife costs more than this knife, or this knife costs more than that knife. And we're going to see if we can find that. So, let's look at the bill of materials. Grade 5 titanium, all three knives. Okay, premium blade steel, all three knives. S35VN, M390, M390, and some of the knives made by Reate at the same price point are S35VN, same thing with Wee. Some of their knives are S35VN. So, haven't found anything yet. Ceramic ball bearings, all three knives. Ceramic detent, all three knives. Over travel stops, all three knives. Okay, still nothing. Okay. Fasteners. Got to get them there, right? Well, yeah, we kind of do. Bestech is using stainless fasteners. Reate and Wee are using titanium fasteners. And believe it or not, titanium fasteners are kind of a big deal because if you make them yourself, they are a time-consuming process. It's kind of ridiculous whenever you realize how much making a set of titanium screws costs over ordering a set of really good screws from the screw maker down the street. And that's what Bestech has done. They have ordered really nice stainless screws from the screw maker down the street. You know, that's pretty tight. Let's go back here to this one. That one even tighter. They've got screws with good tolerances in them. And, you know, that kind of goes from one to the other. That happens whenever you buy screws on the marketplace, but all of them are very tight tolerance screws compared to a lot of knives out there. And I haven't had any problems with any of the fasteners on these Bestech knives. So what we found here is like maybe 30 or 40 bucks worth of difference. So, you know, maybe you can justify the difference here, but you can't justify the difference here or the difference here. And that's where things come into play that a lot of you aren't thinking about. Things that aren't as tangible. Things that you can't wrap your hand around per se. It comes down to intricate milling and finish work. Now we can see this Bestech knife has some very, very nice milling. All the way around. They have done, I mean, look at what they've done right there. That's some pretty fancy milling there, even if it is CNC, guys. And I know a lot of you think, well, you just toss that sucker in a CNC mill and let it go, and doesn't matter. You can do anything you want with a CNC mill. Well, each one of these little radiuses, each one of these chamfers, each one of these little lines for that texture, one, they had to be programmed in. Then they had to be proofed. And had to have the right tool for the mill to make those things. So it's not some super easy thing like many people believe. They think the CNC mill is this magic machine, which it is. But it's not as magic as some people think. But as you can see from looking around this Wee knife, there is a lot more complicated milling on this knife. And this is just one that was easy to get a hold of that I pulled out of a drawer over here. You know, look at that pocket clip. There's a lot of milling done there. Whew. And same thing goes for the Reate knife. If we look at all of the little intricate milling that's done, you start to see where some of that money went. Because, that's tools for the mill, tooling for the mill, that's time in the mill. Because not all these processes happen, you just throw it in the mill and they automatically, it pops out looking like this. On some of these processes, it's in and out of the mill or to another mill, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So there's some of your difference right there. And whenever we talk about finish work, there's another big chunk of your difference. This is a belt finish, very even, very well done, and it was done on top of a stone wash. And I can attest that that is a very hard thing to pull off, even if you're using machinery. It's easier if you've got machinery calibrated properly, but to do it for you, but it's still not something that happens every time one of these blades goes through if they're using a CNC grinder. And they have pulled it off extremely well, chamfering everywhere, and all three of these knives are well chamfered. But just very nice time spent by hand here on the Reate. Same thing here on the Wii, maybe not to as high an extent. And see, I've been using that one, it's got ick on the blade. We'll use the other side. We've got a stone wash here, and I really like how Wii does their stone washes. I like it on there too, but I really like how Wii does theirs. And then we have kind of a hand rub finish up through here. And there's time involved in that. Now, why do I keep bringing that up? Well, whenever we go over to this particular Bestech knife, we have a straight stone wash. This thing come off the CNC grinder or whatever they used to put the bevels in, and it went in the stone wash tub, and that was it. That's a lot of time saved, and that's money. Time is money. We've talked about this 100 times here, but time is money, and that's what we're getting as far as the differences between these two and this one. We have what I'm going to guess, looking at the complexity of the milling, even though that little lanyard tube down there, there's some complexity there, but we have less complex milling, even though it still comes out to a very beautiful knife. We have, anyhow, less complex milling and less time spent on blade finish, even though it's still a very nice looking blade, and less time and money spent on fasteners. So that right there is enough to justify the difference between these two. You're getting what you pay for the Wii, if you're doing a direct comparison with the Bestech. Now, is the Bestech a bad knife? Absolutely not. It's just that there is some difference here. Now, the extra $150 or so to get to this knife, that's going to become harder to justify whenever we're looking even at the way the knives are made. Now, with the Reate, there may be some more hand finish time in the knife, but is it enough to justify that amount of money? I'm not sure. Where Reate justifies theirs is like this is a new torrent. You can't just go over to Blade HQ and buy another one of these. They're just not out there. Reate makes a certain number, whatever number they decide for their run of knives, and quite often they don't make that model again. And that's one reason that they command the extra money for the knives. The other reason is all of their knives fit well. I haven't had a bad Reate across the desk. I did have to replace some pivot stuff in this one, but it wasn't my fault. It wasn't Reate's fault. It was the previous owner's fault. And because it was just, those screws in there were gnarled up. But they're fixed now. Reate got me the right screws, and that's a story for another day. But I finally got the right screws, and I was able to do some rethreading of the pivot and get it all back in good shape. But anyhow, I'm getting off track here. The limited availability is one of the places that Reate gets more money for their knives. And, that is a big part of the higher end of knives. That's another part of why these cost what they do. Because Wii goes through and they make a run of X number of knives, and then they may not make that particular model again for months, sometimes a year. So it helps to hold up the price of the knife and helps to let the retailer get a little more money, and it also gives you something that's somewhat unique. There's only going to be so many of them out there. And that's one of the beautiful things whenever you get into the higher end of knives. It's one of the things that kind of bugs me. There's more to talk about with the Steelcraft series, but there's a lot of Steelcraft knives out there, and they're over $400, and it seems like you can pretty much always get you one. So there's no real exclusivity except for price, and that's a little annoying. Reate and we, in their own brands, have built-in exclusivity. We don't know about Bestech yet. They haven't been around long enough. They haven't had enough time making knives to know if that's going to happen. And that's one other thing we'll look at real quick, then we're going to close this out. Action. These Bestech knives have very, very good actions. All of the TI knives have an action about like that. You guys know what we does. I cut myself. Dadgummit, that's why I don't carry this one. I love the knife, but I always end up cutting myself with that thing. Anyhow, moving along to the Reate. This Reate has a very good action, but it has a lot of lock bar tension. Now, that's by design because all of them are like that. And still very, very smooth action. And that's kind of it, guys. Is there some reason you can put your hand on between these two knives to come up with your price difference? Not really. With the exception of the stainless screws over here, there's not a lot of difference. It's all in finish work. It's all in time involved. It's all in exclusivity of whatever that piece is. And that's really it, because materials-wise, fit and finish-wise, for the way they were intended, these things are all wonderful. However, that final look, that little bit of fit and finish that makes them special, you're getting over here. And you're getting some on these, but you're not getting as much. Will you in the future? We don't know. Anyhow, guys, that's my take on that. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and try not to cut myself again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.